Let's move to the second presenter, who is Dr. Imre Keseru. He is an assistant professor and team leader for urban mobility at the Mobility, Logistics and Automotive Technology Research Center at the Vrije University in Brussels. He has been also the MoTiV project advisory board member. His main research themes include participatory evaluation of urban mobility projects, stakeholder involvement in transport planning, co-creation for mobility, analysis of travel time use, and scenario building for urban mobility. Today, he will give us a keynote speech on the role of ICT and digitalization on value of travel time. So, Imre, the floor is yours now.
Imre, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, sorry. The usual problem with video conference is you either forget the microphone or the camera. So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm really happy to be here at the final conference of the MoTiV project. I'm really sorry that the floor actually is not mine, only the screen, but concerning the situations, yeah, this was the only possible solution. So indeed, I've been following this project as a member of the scientific advisory board, and I think this project has produced major achievements in the research for the value of travel time and on travel-based multitasking, and it really laid foundations for further research in the coming years. So I'm really happy to be here at this final conference. As said, I work at the Free University of Brussels, where we have a research group of now more than 100 people doing research on logistics, mobility, and automotive technology. I'm leading our research projects on urban mobility, and for the past couple of years, I've been also doing research on travel-based multitasking using different types of survey instruments and analysis methods. And in this research, we also looked at the specific influence of digitalization and the proliferation of information and communication technologies. So in this short presentation today, I will refer to some of these concepts and also some research results from our empirical research. So as Gadi already said, that traditionally travel time has been considered as a waste of time without being able to carry out so-called productive activities. But with the proliferation of digital technologies and especially portable devices such as smartphones and portable computers, this has been changing, and in the past, I would say now 15 years, more and more research has been popping up looking at the impact of using these new technologies on how we spend our travel time, and also on how we can use this to reevaluate the value of travel time. So in this presentation, I will briefly talk about the implication of travel-based multitasking, that is the multiple activities that people carry out while traveling. Then I will showcase some results from our previous research on what actually people are doing while traveling, especially referring to the use of ICT devices. And finally, I will very briefly refer to the future of using ICT in the context of multitasking. So travel-based multitasking covers any activities that are carried out parallel to traveling, where traveling is considered to be the primary activity, and any other activities that are carried out on a board of a public transport vehicle, or even in a car, on a bicycle, or while walking, are considered as parallel or secondary activities. Of course, the travel mode significantly determines what we can do while traveling. When we take public transport, then we are not responsible for driving that specific vehicle, so that we don't have to carry out cognitive or physical activities to drive that vehicle. So we are quite free in terms of choosing what activities we can do. We call these activities active activities. While when we have to drive a car or ride on a bicycle, the activities are much more limited, because most of the cognitive and the physical efforts have to go to driving the actual vehicle. So there we can only carry out so-called passive activities, such as listening to the radio, listening to music, or talking to our travel companions. The research on the use of travel time and specifically travel-based multitasking has many implications, and can be used by multiple disciplines. As it has been done in this project, it has specific implications for the value of travel time and appraisal of transport projects, but also, as Gadir mentioned, on the well-being of people, but also how people organize their work life, for example, working while on the go and supporting mobile work environments. But also it can influence travel mode choice, the use of social space, for example, in vehicles like on trains, the ergonomics of how vehicles should be designed to be able to do activities on board. Also time use research in the context of our 24 hours of time that we can spend during the day, but even advertising on public transport or at railway stations, because if people are looking at their phones all the time, then outdoor advertising can be actually less efficient. Also, public transport operators have already discovered the value of looking at these multitasking activities. This is a screenshot from the route planning application of the Canadian Railways, where if you look for a trip between Quebec and Montreal, you get 3 different options. Of course, the recommended one is the train, and if you only look at the travel time, this is the longest trip with 3 hours and 70 minutes. But this route planner also indicates how much productive time you can have during this trip, and in that respect, the train is actually the winner, because you can spend the whole travel time, more than 3 hours, with productive activities, which is not the case even if you are flying, because of having to go to the airport, and also if you are driving, because you have to pay attention to the traffic and driving the vehicle. So as said, multitasking is not something new. People have already been multitasking or were multitasking like 100 years ago when riding trains and reading newspapers or books. But what has really changed the way multitasking is done is the digital and portable technologies. First, without any internet connection, the CD players, cassette players, radios that you could, with which you could listen to music. That's kind of like a passive activity. Then the emergence of portable computers, first without internet connection, but already enabling, for example, business travelers to carry out some work on board. Then the devices got connected to the internet, and then also mobile devices appeared. And with their proliferation, what we have seen in the past 10-15 years is that the way people are traveling and using their travel time has significantly changed. People often say that everybody is nowadays on their smartphones when traveling on a metro or on the train. And if we only look at this photo, it may be true, but we wanted to find out if this is really true through research, by carrying out empirical research, which can be done by observing the people while traveling, but also through different types of surveys. Our questions were in this research, what activities people are actually carrying out while traveling, how widespread is the use of ICT devices, and which demographic, socioeconomic, and trip related attributes influence the type of activities while traveling. First, of course, we had to define the types of activities that we wanted to observe. This is actually not such an easy task because each research almost has its own definition of the different types of activities, and they are usually put on a scale between the productive activities and the more non-productive or leisure activities. And even ICT related activities, so activities when you use a smartphone or another connected device, can be either productive or more leisure related. That's why we distinguish between so-called active ICT activities, where people are actively browsing on their phones, writing or typing on a laptop, for example, and more passive activities when they are playing a game or listening to music. Then relaxing, of course, is the less productive and more leisure-related activity, and in this category we also consider sleeping, or when people say that they are doing nothing. Then you can also have social activities on board, especially when you have a travel companion and you can talk to those people. You can read either digital or physical media. Personal and family care covers the caring for children, for example. And the most productive activities from the point of view of the value of travel time are working and studying. So these are all in all the types of activities that we usually look at when doing empirical research on travel-based multitasking. And as said, the mode of travel is one of the most significant determinants of what people are doing while traveling. As you can see in this chart, we compared the activities of travelers by car and by public transport through a time use survey that we carried out in Flanders. And you can see that people who traveled by car, that's the blue bars, and by public transport show pretty much different behavior. Most of the car drivers were listening to radio, and the other only activities they could carry out were listening to music other than the radio or chatting with their travel companions, while the public transport passengers have a much larger variety of different activities, including reading, sending text messages on the phone, working, or doing the homework. We also carried out an observational study on Brussels public transport vehicles, on trams, metros, and buses, by observing 1,200 passengers and also noting down how long they were traveling. And there, actually, it wasn't the single activity that was most carried out by people was not ICT related, it was talking with other passengers. And then the second one was doing nothing and gazing out of the window. But it was closely followed by other activities which are related to ICT, so messaging, listening to the radio, and browsing on the phone. If we, however, aggregate these activities into major categories of ICT, relaxation, reading, conversation, work, and study, we can see that ICT-related activities are actually in the majority, and actually they are only followed by the conversation activities on the second place. So indeed, we see also from this observational research that more and more people are using ICT devices while on board, even on urban public transport. Another question we looked at was the relationship between the length of the trip, so the duration of the trip, and we counted the number of stops that people traveled and the activities they carried out. And in this chart, we can see that the ICT-related activities, indicated with orange, increase with the length of the trips. And all in all, we also see that the active activities, so the more productive activities, also increase with the travel distance. We also looked at other variables. I'm not gonna go into details there, but we also discovered that the gender has a significant impact on the use of ICT. So more males use ICT devices than females, and the frequency of use is also higher for men. Also, the age has significant impact. People under 30 have a higher likelihood of using smartphones and other devices on board compared to older people. As said, the trip duration has also a significant influence, but also the trip purpose. Because if you are commuting or going on a business trip, you have a higher likelihood that you are doing productive activities in the sense of working or studying. And finally, the presence of the travel companion is also significant in this respect. And what brings the future for travel-based multitasking and the value of travel time? This is how the future was imagined in the 1950s, the age of the autonomous vehicles, where people would play dominoes. Well, the reality will be somewhat probably different with the availability of digital entertainment devices. In the future, people will probably have an endless choice of entertainment, but also work-related activities while on board. And I think the next presentation will look at these future impacts. This also raises issues such as the competitiveness of public transport in this respect, because if people can actually carry out all these entertainment activities on board, then the attractive feature of public transport for travel-based multitasking may be lost. And also, will the use of digital technologies on board actually continue and increase in the future, or are we going to reach a saturation when people actually just get fed up and they just want to sleep on the train and they just want to relax or daydream or look at the other people? Well, looking at the past 3 months and hearing about a digital burnout after working all these months in front of computers, I'm also skeptical in this respect and think that at some point we will reach a saturation of the use of digital devices also on public transport and during travel time in general. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm really looking forward to the next presentations in this final conference.